G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. You know, one of the really big problems in modern society is that we don't understand equity at all. Most people don't know that there's at least two conceptions of equity, and they lead to very different results for communities. In this video, I'll explain them both and what we need to do to fix matters. So, in classical times, they had the two conceptions. One was numerical equity, one was proportionate equity. We practice numerical equity today. The classical philosophers would have thought that we were absolutely crazy. They would have told us that practicing numerical equity would lead to the spurning of virtue and the encouragement of vice. It would lead to a society where people just couldn't be bothered because they'd know that someone would pick up the pieces for their irresponsibility and lack of prudence. Numerical equity is the fixation of modern society and is imputed into most modern public policy. In numerical equity, we treat the multicolored bag of M&Ms as if it's just one color, blue M&Ms. So, if a person can't be bothered to turn up to work on time, doesn't work when they're at work, treats their customers and boss badly and loses their job, they get exactly the same unemployment benefit as a person who used to turn up to work ahead of time, work their guts out, and was just unlucky enough to be working in an industry where the business went broke because of some sort of economic shock. As the great Michael Novak pictures says, in numerical equity, we treat virtue and vice exactly the same. We reward vice just as much as we reward virtue. And of course, that's going to lead to a vice-ridden society. Modern people have it in their head that this is somehow dignifying, treating every person the same. It is not. The person who can't be bothered is not going to suddenly get motivated when they get the same treatment as the person who's trying really hard. You're not doing that person any favors in the long run. In proportionate equity, we finally realize reality, that all the M&Ms are different colors. They've all contributed differently to the circumstances they've got themselves in. They've made different choices. They've practiced different degrees of virtue and vice. And we reward people according to what they've done, the choices they've made, and the efforts they're putting into rectifying the situation. So to draw on that unemployment example, it's not the only place this is embedded in public policy. In the conclusion, I'll talk about some other areas, important areas, but to draw on that example, you know, an unemployed person is trying hard to get a job that needs more skills. We should put more resources into them so that they can get that job. Much more resources than the person who's not putting any effort into getting a job, who's going out of their way not to get a job. Why are we rewarding them the same? By a similar token, the person who's exercised lots of virtue in their life and is continuing to work on that should be rewarded and provided with more resources than the person who's just giving in to their animal lusts and desires, because they're acting like an animal, not like a human being. So one of the virtues I have covered in another video is temperance. It's not giving in to your animal lusts and your desire for food and liquor. It's prudence. It's using your human ability to reason. The thing that makes us unique as humans, the excellence of humans, is using that and thinking through problems, taking appropriate action and taking counsel when necessary. It's fortitude. It's working through those tough times, not throwing in the towel on your job or your life because things get a little bit difficult. It's working through those problems and achieving the excellence as a human. And it's justice. And this is where numerical equity falls down, because justice is about elevating people's human dignity to the appropriate level given their existential circumstances and the choices they're made. When we treat everyone the same, we do not act justly, because we're not rewarding them according to the choices and the reflections and the decisions and the actions that they've done to get themselves in the current predicament. These two conceptions of equity are dealt with in depth in my new book, Natural Law and Government After the COVID Revolution. It's a play on words about Dale's famous book, After the Revolution. It lays out a manifesto for how people can recapture government to have it serve our common good again, which was the whole purpose for government in an Aristotelian sense, and have our human dignity preserved, to avoid the situation we've been in the last 2.5 years where people were told that they were non-essential humans, where their human dignity didn't matter, where they didn't have choice, and when they didn't get the opportunity to reflect, when people were treated without human dignity, treated the way I treat my farm animals. So if we want a better world, if we want a better government, if we want to be able to live the good life in a good society, we need to start rewarding virtue and stop rewarding vice. Otherwise, society is going to continue to deteriorate, and all the bad things that seem to be looming in the near future are actually going to happen. But the choice is ours, and the wisdom, the ancient wisdom, is there. All we need to do is tap into it and understand where we have gone so wrong in recent decades with this silly notion of numerical equity. Of course, this notion of numerical equity versus proportionate equity just doesn't apply to unemployment. It applies to all types of areas of public policy. For instance, those of us who look after our health, who aren't obese, who exercise, who eat properly, why should they receive exactly the same treatment as people who don't do those things, who don't look after their body and then expect the taxpayer to pick up the bill? By a similar vein, students who try hard at school, who obey the rules, who show respect for their elders, why should they get the same treatment and resources as children who don't? By the same token, people who act in a responsible manner in terms of their intimate relations and don't have multiple children to multiple people, but were just unlucky enough to be in a relationship that broke down to no fault of their own, why should they be treated the same way as that latter group? It makes you think, how did we go so wrong? Where did this ridiculous notion of numerical equity come from? It's the same idea that underpinned communist society, and we know how that ended up. I don't know why we think that numerical equity is going to end up well for us when applied to so-called democratic societies. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it the thumbs up, please subscribe. That's how you give me a little bit of feedback. That's how you tell me whether you want more videos made for you or not. Use this video in any way, shape or form you want. If you want to, I know several people use it in their university classes for teaching. Please do so. You have my blessings as long as you're helping other people. And please send the video around to others. We need people to understand these basic concepts so that we can do better in the future. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.